Welcome back to Real Estate After Dark, my uncut thoughts on this week's housing news because the facts come out at night. So, we're going to break down the news stories of the week. Tonight's top stories are mortgage rates hit 8%, worst time ever to buy. Biden unveils plan to increase home ownership, and Morgan Stanley reverses course on the housing market. As you may see if you're watching YouTube, and I'll let you know right now if you listen to the podcast, I have a guest on the show. You'll notice I don't have a lot of guests on the show because, to be honest with you, I don't value a lot of people's opinion. Just to be quite frank, just because everyone's entitled to opinion, but a lot of folks don't do the research to warrant them talking about certain things. So I got Sam. He's the host of Black Real Estate Dialogue. He's a out-of-state real estate investor. He's somebody that does his due diligence with researching articles and just a good knowledgeable guy to talk about real estate. So I'm happy to have him on the show. Anything else you'd like to let the good folks know about yourself, Sam? Oh, also, I think he was I should have looked this up before I did. I think it was like episode number 9 of this very podcast as well. So appreciate you hopping on when I was a newbie to the game.
Oh yeah, absolutely, man. Thanks for having me on again. And you've been on my show a couple of times as well. And I'm glad to collaborate again. I think we see things very similarly in some ways. So I'm excited. I'm excited to get into it and to react and share our thoughts on what's going on, man.
All right, let's get it. As I mentioned, tonight's top story. The housing market was already painful, ugly, and anxious. Now the 8% mortgage rates are back. It's a story from CNBC written by Diana Olick. Here's some key points from the article. So I'm glad they pointed out this because a lot of folks like to compare this housing market to 2008. But they like to point out that one, the inventory right now is super, super low compared to 2008. And as I like to point out to you guys, like inventory is one of the 3 main factors of the housing crash in the 2000s. They also point out rates are high, but still home prices have jumped 40% from pre-pandemic levels. So they're high to folks looking to buy now, but if you had purchased back then pre-pandemic, you're probably sitting pretty. You're not really worrying about today's interest rates. As I mentioned as well, they talk about the lock-in effect where folks that have these low rates are like, hey, I may want to upgrade, but it doesn't make a lot of sense financially to do so because I got to move into, if I move into an equivalent home, but I'm going from a 3% to 8% rate, like my payment's going up. If I move into a better home, my payment's going up even more. So a lot of folks just feel like they're locked into a home. And also I think folks feel like that because folks have coined this term golden handcuffs. And so I don't know. It's kind of like a narrative. Folks can do whatever they want. I don't feel locked into my house. Foreclosures, once again, are extremely low as well. So, where may things go into the future? So, NAR, the National Association of Realtors, says, hey, despite 8% rates and the housing shortage, prices are looking like they're going to be flat going forward. Another thing, sorry, I've been rambling a little bit, or I don't know if you wanted to hop in or anything kind of struck your ear as far as the topic so far, Sam?
Yeah. So it's funny. There's the rhetoric out there that this 8% interest rate is such a catastrophic thing. But the reality of it is over the last 50 years, the average is about 7.5%. So interest rates aren't actually high. Yeah. We've just been spoiled over the last 10 years, especially those of us who are younger, by these ridiculously low interest rates. And so the interest rate is not the problem, right? The prices are going to continue to go up. So I think it behooves anyone who wants to get into the game to utilize some creativity and think outside the box, work with a real estate agent who can think outside of the box and get uncomfortable. You might have to buy a property that you don't necessarily, it's not your dream property, but it's a start. And so, I think people should look at what they can afford. And this is another uncomfortable thing. You might have to move, right? You might have to move a bit further out from where you live or prepare to move to another state altogether eventually, even if it's not now. And so, the prices aren't going to be diving down and there's no telling what the interest rates are going to do, but interest rates are not high from a historical perspective.
Yeah, I'm glad you pointed that out. I can't remember what I posted, but somebody was in my comments talking about, hey, home prices are unaffordable. It's weird. Like maybe the post was trending in South Florida, but like 3 different folks were in my comments like, hey, well, home prices are unaffordable in South Florida, and I'm just like, so I didn't want to be like a jerk because I didn't really know these people. But I was thinking like, okay, well, maybe you got to move out of South Florida. I mean, it's nice. I know it isn't all South Beach, but maybe you got to move a little bit further to a place that isn't so desirable. I mean, if you're on the beach, if you're in a nice condo downtown, like it's gonna cost you a little bit of money because that's where everybody wants to live.
Yeah, I mean, I agree 100%. And, I empathize with people who have a tie to a particular community and want to stay there. But
Yeah,
real estate, it's very objective. If you can't afford there, you might have to leave, right?
yeah,
And I don't think we should feel that moving is so foreign. No one's saying to move tomorrow, but you might have to look a couple years down the line, and that might be the best thing to do if you want to get into a home,
yeah,
right? But speaking of those in particular who are looking for a primary residence, right? Our ancestors moved from somewhere, right? Wherever you're at now, somebody came from somewhere, whether
yeah,
it's abroad, like my family, or whether it's from the north to the south, or from the south to the north, or from the south to the west, and so on. So you might just have to migrate again.
yeah. Very, 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 very true. Folks always ask me, hey, you think about moving back to DC? And I'm like, I think about it, but then I look at the prices, and I'm like, nah, I'll probably be in Dallas for the immediate and unimmediate future. So, more from this article. Buyers are likely to get the best deals from builders, especially large production builders like Lennar and D.R. Horton. So, I've said this a couple of times, but if you all are unaware, so if you think you're like right now, hey, I'm really in a position financially and mentally to buy a new home, but I think rates are just too high. Really, really explore new construction homes because these builders, at least in the Texas market, and I've seen articles everywhere, they're doing whatever they can to get folks into homes. And for instance, they're giving you like crazy well below market rates. And so, like I know I'm not gonna say who it is because I'll tell you whatever. Lennar, for instance, like here in the Dallas market, they're offering rates at 4.25 rate. They'll offer you an introductory rate of 4.25. I've seen DR Horton at like 5.5. I've seen another builder, Starlight, 5.25, and they're able to offer you these low rates. And it isn't like what I tell you guys to look out for, which is like watch out for bills lenders giving you low rates, but buying down the rate without you looking. No, these are the actual rates they're giving you. And folks say, hey, how can they do that? Well, it's because builders have crazy margins, right? So if they're making on average, depending on who the builder is, like 20 to 30% margin, they'd rather make, like, let's say the number is 25%. They'd rather make 20% margin and give you 5% back in fees and buy downs than to make nothing because folks don't want to buy a home at an 8% interest rate. So some of these builders have like crazy discounts to get you to move a home. So I've seen that like in real life with folks I've worked for.
Oh, um, how does that work? So it's like, all right, let's walk it through. So let's say you get a home from DR Horton, it's 400,000, and you're quoted from your lender at an 8% interest rate. If I understand correctly, the builder would essentially pay to buy down that rate to get you in the home.
Yeah. Essentially, so since like these, so sorta and sorta not. So you have to use the builder's ecosystem. So the only way you get this discount is you've used the builder, obviously, to buy the home. The
Got
builder
it.
typically owns a mortgage company, and then the builder typically owns a title company. So since they own the whole ecosystem, like they can absorb that hit, right? So that the DR Horton mortgage company can absorb the $10,000 $15,000 to buy down the rate like 2% because they're making $80,000 profit maybe on that home. So like the mortgage company itself may be taking a financial loss, but they're just looking at it from the big picture, the D.R. Horton um, top of the pyramid or whatever you call it, the D.R. Horton company itself. So it's like the builder, they sell a home for $80,000, they make $80,000 profit. The lender may lose money on the deal because they're buying down the rate so much. So let's say the lender loses let's say $10,000 on the deal because they paid so much money to buy down the rate to give you that 4% rate or that 5% rate. Then the title company makes the title fees. But as a whole, they've made $60,000. out of the deal because they control the whole operation. So if you take your own private, lender to the deal, you can of course still buy the house, but you're not getting that rate. You're getting whatever that lender can bring to the table. And your lenders, they're not going to obviously, I don't know if it's obviously not, they're not going to buy down the rate as low as like the builder's lender would, because they're going to take a financial L because they don't, they don't own the other parts, the builder and the title company. If that makes sense.
That's interesting, man. I didn't realize that was taking place.
Yeah, yeah, yes, yes, crazy, crazy discounts. So,
Hmm.
and then last bit from the article is construction of single family homes is rising slowly, but still nowhere near meeting demand. So I think last I saw, we're short somewhere between like 1.5 million and like 5.5 million homes nationwide. So yeah, we're going to be in this hole for a while, and maybe for forever, because how are we going to catch up? So, did you have anything else you wanted to touch on as far as this topic, Sam?
No, no, I think we're all good.
Okay, cool. Let's jump into our next story. I'm a realtor in Dallas and would love to help you reach your goals of home ownership. So click the link in the description and just schedule a call no matter where you are on your journey. Not in Dallas? No worries, I can help connect you with a vetted realtor in your local jurisdiction as well. And feel free to share with friends, family, and foes. Everyone gets love. Biden unveils plan to increase U.S. home ownership, how it benefits low to middle income families looking to build generational wealth. From Go Banking Rates. So let's go into the story. So the one of the first things they're looking at doing is something called the Neighborhood Homes Tax Credit. It's not been signed by Congress, so who knows what happens. There's a lot of y'all know what's going on with politics. So who knows if that's coming into effect? But it's 16 billion allocated to building or rehabilitating 400,000 new homes across the U.S. And also will provide 10 billion in down payment assistance and 100 million to supplement first-time homebuyers. So this is kind of high level. Haven't seen all the details of the plan, but potentially bringing $400,000 homes onto the market is a huge number. As a point of reference, this year, 2023, roughly the projections are about 4.1 million homes will be sold. So that's a low number recently, but it's 10% of that number. So that's a significant number there. Next one is pretty cool, and this may be something that's beneficial in your neck of the woods, Sam. So there are policy changes to make it easier to qualify for a mortgage and lower rates. So one thing that HUD is looking to do is allowing folks to use the income from ADUs as far as qualifying for loans. So it used to be that you could not use those ADUs as far as income when qualifying. So for instance, like if somebody had an ADU on their property, they could be having a renter on Airbnb or whatever, but your lender would not use that income just as part of the guidelines. So I know that's something that's rough, like in high cost living areas, like where you are, Sam, as far as folks being able to potentially afford single family properties and definitely multifamily properties and qualifying for those.
This is interesting, man.
Yeah. And then the last part of it is, excuse me, the two more things are for the FHA 203K rehab loan. They're kind of extending the timeline that you can use for renovations, which would, in theory, allow folks to do more repairs on the properties. So therefore, bringing more inventory onto the market. And then last but not least, the USDA is also working on launching a pilot program to expand eligibility criteria for the community land trust organization. So that's more for the indigenous Native American population on tribal lands, those folks getting access to those funds so that they can buy homes in the land they used to reside on. So that is that's kind of the keynotes from that story. Did you have anything you want to touch on as far as that?
Yeah, I mean, I think the 203K program is really good, and I know 203K is something that is popular and that folks promote a lot. And so I think anything to make that program a little bit easier and more beneficial and a little more lenient, frankly, it all helps. It all helps, and hopefully, there are more folks who want to tap into the program if this thing goes through, and hopefully can walk into a property with some equity after making those
Yeah,
repairs.
yeah, most definitely. All right, for our last story, top story of the evening, Morgan Stanley reverses course on the housing market, sees a lot more pain ahead for home buyers. From Elena Botros. So previously at the beginning of the year, so at the beginning of the year, typically all organizations make some sort of forecast. They do it for news, they do it for their bottom line, right? They want to know what's going to happen so they can, invest properly, allocate funds, etc. So at the beginning of the year, they predicted that home prices would fall 4% in 2023. As you're hopefully well aware of, the housing market has been resilient despite the high interest. And so now they've kind of updated their numbers, saying that, hey, we're most likely going to end the year up 5% nationwide. And so, like I said, if rates are pretty high, so based on their calculations way back in the day when rates were only 7.12%, based on that, like the median home price is up basically 27% year over year. So rates are higher and home prices are higher, but still the housing market has been resilient. All right. So then just the last part of the story is just kind of comparing it as well, is that when they initially started their predictions, they were like, hey, between when they started in 2022 and 2024, they said that home prices would dip basically a whole 10% between then and 2024. So their prediction was wrong, right? No harm in that. I think a lot of folks thought that the housing market may take a little bit of dip. I thought it may take like a slight dip or stay flat, but I always say like organizations, whether it's Morgan Stanley, Wells Fargo, Zillow, whoever, typically they've done a lot of research to get to whatever that number is, and no one can predict the future. So often they are wrong or not spot on the number. And I just like to point that out to say that, hey, you hear folks making predictions online. Anybody that's like super definitive or demonstrative with their prediction, to me, that always there's always some ulterior motive there. It's like they're predicting doom and gloom because they're probably selling something. They're predicting the real estate market will go to the moon because they're probably selling something, a house. So just some food for thought. I wanted to point out kind of the change of course that Morgan Stanley did, just because even like I said, the best are folks that do a lot of research are often wrong as well. So
Yeah,
have
I mean,
any thoughts on this?
yeah, I think anybody trying to predict prices going up and down, you're wasting your time.
Yeah.
And I think the language here is very interesting. And I mean, it is a media company, but notice they said an even bigger crash. There's no crash coming, an even bigger crash
Yeah.
in which home prices would tumble 20% in I mean, even if home prices dip 10%, you got to look at the entire year, the last couple of years. It's still a way more expensive than it was a few years ago. So if prices drop 10%, it really doesn't matter that
Yeah.
much. And so I think people predicting the price, I mean, you can do your best to control the price you come in at and the price that you buy a
Yes.
property at.
Yeah.
And you absolutely shouldn't be overpaying for a property. I think if you try to control those things, you'll be okay. But these articles will just have you on a pendulum. You'll just be, going up and down with the headline. So, I thought that was interesting. And then also, I think on the previous slide, it mentioned something to the effect of the median priced home. What is it? The monthly payment, calculating the monthly payment on the median priced home. People need to understand this. Like the median priced home is the number in the middle, and they're considering every state, right?
Yeah.
And so real estate is local. So you should look at those numbers locally where you're investing at. So the 38% they're talking about, or all these data points they're talking about, may not apply to where you live or where you're looking to invest. So,
Yeah.
this is broad stroke information. And again, this is a media company that this is what they're supposed to do. But I think people need to look behind the numbers and say, all right, what does this look like where I'm at right now? It could be drastically different. Who knows?
Very, very good point. Because, like I said, if you're buying a home in Dallas, you could care less what's happening with the home prices in Seattle, DC, Miami. Yeah, what's going on like in your local market? It
Yep.
really is what matters. So yeah, definitely check in with your local resource, whether it's an informed local realtor, your local real estate articles, and things of that nature. Yeah, and also, yeah, I didn't catch that the crash. So there's not even really a definition of a crash. Just FYI, like there's not like a definition of what a crash means. So cool. Those are our top stories. So I have a segment which I've not named yet. Just going to call it quick hit stories. So I'm going to read a headline, and then I'm going to ask Sam if he wants to talk about it or not. So we'll see how this goes. Let's get into it. First headline is home buyers must earn $115,000 to afford the typical U.S. home. That's about $40,000 more than the typical American household earns. Want to talk about that or no?
Let's talk about it.
All right. So this is an article from Redfin. They just point out basically that I'll just read the quick blurb. Home buyers must earn $114,623 to afford the median priced U.S. home, up 15% from a year ago, up 50% since the start of the pandemic. That's the highest annual increase to afford a home on record. What do you think about that?
I think it's misleading because it's looking at the totality. It's looking at everybody everywhere, right? And just
Yeah.
putting everybody into a formula. So I'm going to post this because people are going to react to it and we'll have a discussion. But look behind the numbers. The headline is there so you can read the article. And it was an interesting article. But that is the median US priced home. That's the price in the middle of every single home in the United States,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So it's skewed. I would be curious to know what is this in my particular market.
Yeah.
And I don't know if the article had that. I don't recall if it had, if you could like filter and all that stuff. But, it's probably a safe assumption that in each individual state, it's probably higher to some degree
Yeah.
than it was a couple of years ago because prices have gone up. But again, prices haven't gone up at the same rate over the last 3 years in every city. So I would say, look at your income and what you can afford in your local area. And if you actually can't qualify for something in your local area, then, you got some thinking to do.
Yes, yeah.
So that's what I would say about it. Good
Yeah, yeah.
job
That
on
like
the
the,
headline.
the the aforementioned South Florida market is kind of crazy. Like, I saw a breakdown of this, but it was like 2 or 3 months ago. Like South Florida was at like 63% since the pandemic. Like so,
Wow.
crazy numbers. And you have other markets that were. I think they show like the top. I wish I had edited that slide to this. They show like the top 40 markets. I think the smallest market was like up 15% of like the top 40 markets. As far as during that time frame. All right.
Wow.
Next story. Cities try every tool to fix the housing crisis except what works. Want to talk about this?
Let's do it.
All right. Surprise, surprise. You hear about all these ways to do this or that. Typically, so at the end of every episode, I say, buy land, rumor has it they're not making any more of it. That's because land is scarce. You can only build homes in so many areas, right? And so one of the issues we have is zoning issues. Like everyone's like, hey, I want affordable housing, I want this, but they're just like, not necessarily anywhere near my house though. Like I'm fine with affordable housing, but I don't want an apartment building next to down the street from me. I don't want a multifamily property down the block from me. I just want to have my neighborhood, my big lawn, my white fence, and all that. So the solution to a lot of these problems you see is zoning and getting rid of restrictive zoning. It's kind of the point of the article. You agree or disagree?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think there's a lot of hypocrisy, right? So if you look at it from just the individual level and folks in living in a particular city, there's a lot of not in my backyard stuff
Yeah.
going on. So the same people who claim they care about housing and more affordability and all that stuff, the only way to have more affordability is to increase the supply of
Yeah.
housing in a particular area. It's a numbers game, it's supply and demand, right? So if there is a scarce amount of rental units or homes to buy, the prices are going to go up. That's just how it works.
Yeah.
And so, there are people who, go to the council meetings and neighborhood stuff, and they shut down the opportunity to have more density, to increase. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm glad this ADU stuff is happening because it's needed. I mean, that's
Yeah.
just the fact of the matter. You might have to have more people on your block, more people in your neighborhood for the prices to come down for everybody. It
Yeah.
just is what it is. And so I think people should keep the same energy on the matter and just pick a side. And I think cities also need to make it more incentivized development, right? You don't incentivize development by having these ridiculously restrictive rental laws and all these things if you want people to come in there and develop.
Yeah.
And I think the local governments need to do a better job in the cities that they're not doing this of working with developers and incentivizing mixed use and affordable housing, more tax credits, more subsidies. Like people aren't business to make money.
Yeah.
Developers are looking to make money.
Yes. Yes.
You go to work to make money, right?
Yes.
And so I think it's just going to take all parties working together to help with this issue. And, you know, I think zoning laws in a lot of areas need to change. I'm always jealous of places like Houston that have no zoning laws and, you know, developers are having a field day out there, right? Because they're able to do business. It's an area that's conducive to do business and to build, unlike a place like LA, right? So, I mean, a lot of it probably boils down to politics, but that's my thoughts on it. I think there's a lot of hypocrisy. Like the actions of those speaking are not matching their words.
Yeah. Definitely. All right, next story. Let's go to the next one. San Francisco could get 90% of its homeless off the street with the country's fiercest housing speculation tax, but landlords are already fighting it tooth and nail. Want to talk about this?
Let's talk about it.
All right, 3 for 3 so far. Okay, so this week, San Fran formalized a voter-approved law known as Prop M, basically cracking down on multifamily units and folks that let them sit vacant. So they think they could push as many as 7,000 units onto the market, which would be literally 90% of the city's homeless getting housed based on the above data. What you think about this?
So when they say cracking down, what does that mean? Like cracking down on people that let them sit? Does that mean
apparently, like, you know, so folks will, so let's say there's folks will develop this, like these fancy apartments and all this speculation, then they'll find out that, oh man, we actually can't get the rent we want, or they won't rent at homes at a certain level just because, like, hey, I'd rather let it sit than not rent the property. So you have all these homes just sitting vacant. I mean, the landlords are paying the taxes on them, but they're just sitting vacant. So the city's like, well, you need to do something with these properties, right? You need to house them for the betterment of the city. And the landlords are like, why shouldn't we? If I can afford to let a building sit empty, it's, you know, it's my, I think in the article they mentioned, like, it's my constitutional right. So the San Fran is like, okay, you can do that, but we're going to tax you at a higher rate if you're not using these properties in order to let people live in them, which is the whole point of the property, which is probably why you got the approval to build these apartments in the first place, not just to have them sit there vacant.
Got it. So is the issue, correct me if I'm wrong, is the issue that there aren't enough, I'm assuming these are like market rate, probably expensive, super expensive apartments. So is the issue that there's not enough renters to fill all of these apartments, like market rate renters?
Yeah, to an extent, which then begs the question, what is market rate if folks can't afford to live in these properties, right? And so the issue basically is that for whatever reason, they don't dive into all the reasons, but for whatever reason, there are at least 7,000 units, multifamily units, just sitting vacant in San Francisco. They're not being rented out. So the city's like, hey, do what you want to do, but we're going to tax you at a higher rate. And they're like, hey, that in theory could house 90% of the city's homeless, but like I don't know where these people are getting money to get to the properties either. That's the part that the article didn't connect with me, is like, where are these homeless people getting money to actually get into the property? So they didn't really connect the dots on that part, but it was just, once again, it was an interesting headline, I think, to say, hey, there's a bunch of vacant homes, there are a bunch of people without homes. San Francisco's trying to do their best to connect the dots there.
Yeah, that's so interesting, because it's like, if they can't rent the properties and y'all not going to help them do so, or whatever the case is, like, what are you actually saying? Like, it's almost like they are trying to conflate two issues
Yeah,
that aren't really related,
yeah,
and it doesn't really make sense to me. It'd be one thing if they said, you know, we'll partner with you with folks who are coming off of the street and starting anew. We're going to have them go through whatever program, so on and so forth. And if you're willing, we can subsidize we can like cover their rent. Or that's
yeah,
a different conversation
yeah,
than,
yeah,
hey, if you don't fill these units, we're gonna tax you. I
yeah,
can't fill these units. I
yeah,
don't have enough applicants. I don't have people qualified or interested
yeah,
in this building. Maybe we completely miscalculated
yeah,
how much we could fill. And the thing is, too, it says 7,000 across the city. That number sounds big, but what if it's 10% vacancy at a large number of properties? I'm just throwing that out there. The
uh-huh,
7,000 number sounds big, but
yeah,
that's not one company. That's
yeah,
not
yeah,
one
yeah,
building. You know what I'm
yeah,
saying?
yeah,
So I'm curious how much it's spread across. And if it's a little bit at a lot of different buildings, that's a different story,
yeah,
because these large multifamily properties, presumably if that they're, those large ones and not a 4 unit or something, they factor in vacancy. And
yeah,
so there is an expectation of some level of vacant units. So, I mean, I think the way they constructed the information is very interesting, but I want to know what's behind it and the deeper actual information at a more granular level, in my opinion.
yeah. Very, 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 very good point. See our next topic. Seattle voters to decide on $970 million levy to fund affordable housing.
Let's talk about it.
All right. So basically, over the next 20 years, Seattle, probably insert your city and every other major city, expected to need 3,500 new homes every year for people with low to moderate incomes. The levy is expected to fund 3,200 new homes in that income range over 7 years. So basically, they're raising more taxes in order to put funds towards affordable housing. Is what they're doing with this money.
I don't see why they would increase taxes to do that. Who's First of all, who's going to build them? They didn't talk about that. And why do they need to raise taxes on individuals to fund this? What they could do is perhaps incentivize developers, provide some certain tax credits, do something else to, one, incentivize development
Mhm.
of affordable housing, and two, the citizens who are probably already paying a bunch of taxes shouldn't have to pay more. I don't like stuff that legislation that increases taxes,
Mhm.
because I think you should just figure out another way to how to
Gotcha,
do it.
gotcha.
I'm not a big fan of increasing taxes for things.
Okay.
And so I would say figure out another way. Look at other cities that have increased their affordable housing. And I don't think just slapping a tax on it is the answer, because that doesn't tell me anything. You're charging me more taxes, but what is the plan? What is the plan? I'm not sure if they expanded on it in the article, but I was repelled by the increase in taxes, to be honest with you. And this plan seems very broad in general. And yeah, I'm curious to know more details.
Okay. So yeah, they didn't really touch on it in the article, but we always know the government
Of course, they didn't.
they allocate the money perfectly. So I'm sure it's going
They
to
know
all
exactly
the
what they're doing.
go to all the right places. All right. So it's an article, it's a topic I saw on your page. I always say Illinois with S.
Yes.
I don't know how to pronounce the state, but Illinois, as I call it, provides $9,000 in rental assistance to migrants seeking temporary housing. Sure, you want to talk about this?
Yes.
All right. What's your thoughts on this?
All right. So I am the son of immigrants. Both my parents came from Haiti. So I'm just going to preface my statement by saying that. So I understand, and I'm not blaming those coming over for what's going on. Like, hey, I don't know what situation you came from and all those things, whatever. So with that said, I think I don't think this makes any sense. I think this is putting a band-aid on the situation. I think, quite frankly, it's just a campaign to get more votes. And so, I am not aware of any government program in which the people receiving assistance not only received 6 months of rent, but also a starter kit for furnishing their home and support with moving in.
Uh-huh.
And in the video that I saw, the person, I think she was like the chief of staff or something like that, she mentioned that after 6 months, which is how long the support will last, and it breaks down to about $1,500 a month. After 6 months, the hope is that people will have started their legal process, be legally authorized to work. But here's the question they didn't answer. They didn't say anything about what will happen after the 6 months. Can the landlord evict them? And how are they supposed to process 11,000 plus people's authorization to work, those who are of working age? How in the world are they supposed to do that in 6 months? And then if the person can't work after 6 months, then what happens? Are they back on the police precinct floor? Are they back in the shelter? Are they back in a tent on the street? So in my opinion, this is not a well thought out idea.
Mm-hmm.
And what should be happening during those 6 months is they should be receiving English language classes. They should be receiving job training to prepare for at least when their stuff clears.
Mm-hmm.
And hey, if you're going to do 6 months, you might as well do a year. I don't know how long the average time is to get that paperwork processed, but I think the support, if they really want to help, the support should align with the average amount of time that they expect it to take to get people's stuff cleared. Otherwise, in 6 months, there's going to be a bunch of people on the street.
That's a good point, because people with a working history in the U.S., job skills in the U.S., a lot of times they're out of a job for more than 6 months. So you're definitely somebody coming from wherever, started from literally zero, or not even zero, starting from honestly in the hole. They're supposed to get a job and be on their feet in 6 months. Yeah. Interesting.
I'm not. They're not really helping people. Like, what can you do in 6 months? Like, you can't. This is not sustainable, in my opinion. So that's my take on it.
All right. I think this is the last one. Real estate agents do not date the rate and marry the house. Yay, nay, you want to talk about this?
Mm-mm.
No.
You know what? Let's talk about it.
All right. I think 5 for 5, but I think that's the last one. Okay, so guys always hear, guys and gals, folks will be like, marry the house, date the rate. Basically, what that means is, if you love the house, buy it. Don't worry about the interest rate at all, because you can just refinance in the future. I've always said that is reckless advice for everything we talked about so far in today's episodes, because literally no one can predict the future. So if you're like, hey, this home price is unaffordable, or is stretching my budget, like the last button's about to pop on this budget shirt, but I can just refinance in the future. So if I can hold on for 2 years, 1 year, it'll be all good. So reckless advice is something that rhymed, and to me, bogus realtors just said that because that just helped them get a quick commission check. But it's always been reckless advice to me, and so now folks are more coming around to being like, hey, that's bad advice, and that was kind of like what they talked about in this order, because there's no guarantees that you can refinance in the future, whether it's your income maybe going down, the home price is going down, rates not going down. Property taxes, believe it or not, they pretty much always go up. Insurance goes up. So even if rates come down in the future, if your tax and insurance go up, you may still be at kind of the same payment, even if you are able to lower the interest rate. So that's kind of the gist of the article.
Yeah. I mean, I agree with that. I think at the end of the day, you need to buy something that you can afford. And even if it's a rental property, you need to be able to afford it in the event that the tenants don't pay. And even if you're buying like a house hack and you live in one unit and rent out 1 to 3 others, you need to be able to carry that mortgage and have enough money saved up when things go wrong. You should not be buying stuff with your last and not having anything in reserves and then running up credit cards and all this stuff. Like, if you need to do all that, you just need to wait. And so, I think you can date the rate and marry the house if you can afford it.
Yeah.
So that's what I say. It's important to be as conservative as possible. And obviously both of our platforms push real estate and all these things, but you need to be ready for it. You need to be ready for that responsibility, whether it's your primary residence or investment property, or whatever the case is.
Makes sense. So yeah, that refinance, it's just a bonus. I always say, if you can do it, you can do it. If not, hey. So okay, cool. Yeah, so that is the end of the episode. Appreciate you hopping on, Sam. So Yeah, it was cool. That's my first time, as I was saying before we started, was kind of doing a kind of show with somebody else, not either interviewing or being interviewed. So I think it went well. I had no idea how it would go. I don't know what your thoughts are on today's show. So
No, that was a lot of fun, man. I can rant about real estate
uh-huh.
all day.
Yeah,
So
okay.
I'm excited to come back, man. And yeah, it was a lot of fun. It's a lot of
Okay.
fun.
Okay, yeah,
I'll definitely be back.
think it went well. So cool. Where can the folks find you at? Or what do you got going on?
Yes. So you can find me everywhere at Black Real Estate Dialogue. So you can find me on YouTube. You can find me on Instagram. And if you want to check out the show, go to Black Real Estate Dialogue. Find it anywhere, Apple, Spotify, etc. Just type in Black Real Estate Dialogue wherever you are, and you can find me.
All right, so there you go. All that information will be in the details of the show. If you guys think about any other topics, feel free to email me. It may make the show if I find it interesting. But as always, buy land. Rumor has it they're not making any more of it.